Yeah, and we're live. This is David Miller, Johnny Dubowski, Lauren Moore-Mignon, me, John Kelvin. We're going to talk about building new digital platforms. And there's some conversation community stuff that sort of spawned this group. We can cover that in the notes. It's not important. I founded the conversation community 4 years ago. I just wanted to find out what the digital conversations are and if you can actually do them. I'm still not really sure that we can, but we're trying as hard as we can because we want to go outside the abomination that is Facebook, right? I hope I can say Facebook without sort of having NSA striking the dead. So that's me, right? And Lauren has done a brilliant job of convening other groups. It's basically just questions, gathering into recorded conversations, and then we'll build amazing tools and services. And that's it, essentially, right? So I would suggest you do kind of just a short 1 minute check-in, all of us, basically just to commit to videotape, so to speak.
That's a great idea. Okay, who goes first? Should I just go for it?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, this whole adventure started 2 years ago when Johnny and I reconnected. Johnny and I used to play in a band together like 20 years ago, and in New York City. And the big problem statement was digital identity is a scary mess. The internet is broken, and are we brave enough and crazy enough to even begin to come up with some kind of solution? And we managed. I mean, it came together very, very quickly. At least from my memory, sort of the initial seeds for what then evolved into what Johnny's going to explain to you or sort of demonstrate in a little bit. Those seeds were planted 2 years ago within days of us beginning our conversation. And the conversation or the sort of research and ongoing conversation never wavered too far from those original ideas, which to me meant that there was something deeply sort of instinctual about the need for a solution and what that solution actually looks like. You could feel it practically, what needed to happen. And Johnny and I, our consensus is that identity needs to be at the center of everything. A person's connection to another person doesn't go through a third party. It goes directly through your identity. That people and services connect to you through your identity and not you to them through somebody else. The direct way seemed to always be the best way. And that all of a sudden had all of these other implications. Like it didn't matter what direction you sort of followed this idea down, it seemed to be good and have it sort of had positive feedback loops wherever you placed it, which made us really excited. Like we thought we've really stumbled across something really transformative and this beautiful idea. And then we started to do our research and started to read, and then we realized that there's some very, very smart people who've been talking about this for decades. Yeah. Thinking about Ted Nelson very specifically, who has this sort of utopian way of how information should be connected and treated, and how people should be treated in information networks. And Johnny started to throw things like Xanadu at me, and we started to look at sort of the original ideas. How did this whole experiment of the internet start? And thought, we're going to take those ideas and reinvent them. We'll make them new. We'll put them in a different context, or figure out a way to recontextualize them and make them valuable today. And the one thing that we kind of kept coming back to was that we have to deliver sort of topic-specific value to people. If you want to pull them out of the morass of these huge monolithic structures like Facebook and Google and Amazon, if you want to pull them out of this mess, you have to give them something very, very valuable and very specific that they can latch onto. And sort of the obvious or for me at least, the obvious beginning was, why don't we start with a really big problem like climate change? Something where a lot of people rally around ideas. There is no consensus, but there's a lot of emotion, and you can pull people into this space by giving them information that is highly contextualized and valuable to them in the context in which they exist, geographically or socially, or even in sort of divided by class, depending on where you are, whether you live in Southeast Asia or in Europe or in America, or you make a lot of money or no money, or to sort of give people this way into something complicated like solving climate change. And I'm going to stop there because that was already a lot.
No, I loved every second of that. And it don't matter if we break the time format or the check-ins or the check-outs, it doesn't matter, right? There's an infinite amount of YouTube live digital recording stuff to go by, right? So you can,
well, so at some point somebody's going to have to edit this stuff, and I feel sorry. I feel sorry for that person already.
No, I've done annotations. That's actually part of my day job. So it's kind of Ron is joining as well. Hi, Ron.
Hello,
everyone.
So we're in the middle of long, meaty, very valuable intros. So Johnny, you could add a thing or two, right? If you want.
So my name's Johnny Dabowski, and I've been a musician and also working as a cyberneticist, really focusing on environmental management and health systems, and looking at how to combine computer systems, art as an expressionary tool, and various forms of the semantic web to build something that gives people this context that David spoke about. I started this organization called Rock and Renew about 12 years ago. I was touring with a lot of really famous bands like Blondie and Meatloaf and Everclear, and playing in front of like 20,000 people a night. And because I personally was an environmental scientist and touring with a waste veggie oil tour bus, it was brought to my attention by my friends and peers that this could be a teachable educational program. So we built over 200 school gardens in 18 cities. We helped to organize the world's largest day of action with Bill McKibben and 350.org. I helped Bill to start Campus Climate Change when it was just 2,000 people, and then we grew it to 6,000, and then 10,000, and then 24 million people participated in that largest day of action. And the thing that I noticed was that as an organization, we kept hitting a ceiling of scalability. As I would travel to different cities, I would bring together these subject matter expert teams, and they would help figure out the context of the space and what we could build there. And the solutions were really awesome. The activism and the social media allowed us to spread the message really far, but nobody was sharing the actual solutions. So I set out in 2013 when I learned about Bitcoin and started mining it. I wanted to connect IoT devices and the semantic web. Back then, it was impossible. And only in the last year has it become viable that we could give an identity not just to us as individuals, but to create a schema and ontology map for concepts, and to give identity to devices, to people, to organizations, and then using tokenized mechanics, create this incentive structure where people can, first of all, make sure that they're on the same page. So if they're talking about the watershed, they're pulling in the climate schema API, and they know that when they talk about it and they borrow each other's concepts, it'll be set up in the right way with the right concepts. And we developed something, I've worked for 10 different blockchain companies as evangelist and developer, and David and I and Jason have tried a lot of platforms, and we realized that in order to move forward in groups like this, where I think the most important work is happening, we need to forget about actual products and do the Bucky Fuller, solutions, not products. So we've come up with a method and a series of protocols that are totally generic. So we use Keybase, and I can show you a short little demo later. But basically, it doesn't matter which platform you use. There's a user-facing ecosystem where somebody can simply set up their self-sovereign identity. They can create a conversation space or a chat room. They can work across different blockchains, and using newer innovations like the token curated registry and the DAO and the DAC, which are things that are very relevant to this group, we don't need to put our eggs in one basket. And solving these big problems is hard enough without dealing with the token mechanics of having a native coin. So when you have the application value tied to the price of a token, you see what's happened. You know, a lot of the projects that are dealing with climate change and social impact issues, where suddenly their value of their token is 80 or 90% less than it was 6 months ago, it makes it virtually impossible for them to actually have a positive community, because everybody's worried about the price of their token. So I've come up with a method that I think we can borrow for this group, which is a generic method to figure out how we work together, how we reuse concepts, what incentivization looks like, what attestation looks like. You know, some of the real core generic concepts we've mapped. And I have a way that we can use Keybase as an identity platform and then try each of them out, just as we try out these different communication platforms, and make it as easy as possible for the user to experience that.
This is all great. I will just briefly intersperse with precision why I think it's great, because I have come from pattern language, which is a completely different direction, and figured out that the core modules are identity, conversation, tokenization, and DAO. So that it's kind of weird, right? It's uncannily weird that you and I should sort of arrive at basically the same thing and not knowing each other. This tells us kind of at least some kind of anecdotal evidence that there's stuff here that is worth building, because otherwise this would simply not happen, right? We are probably have some intention along, let's just effing do something that would work really great, right? That's kind of, and then these modules sort of just pops out, right? I can, if you think I'm lying, because some people do.
No, I don't.
I can actually send you, and you can see the data. This is me sort of going on kind of like a year or so ago. With an information architecture, you can just see that, whoa, did you just sort of invent that on the fly? No.
It's amazing.
Long, hard slog.
Yeah.
And the beauty is, and why I want to give a lot of it back to the community, is that I've done the pattern mining weird stuff, like field testing of patterns inside the conversation community, inside actual digital conversations, and just found out through lots and lots of field testing that here's the thing we could actually build. So I skip all those sort of weird stuff about sort of how I did that. We could come back to that later. The good thing with the large finite pattern language is that there's no worry about us having sort of to figure out small details. You can zoom in and you can zoom out, zoom down all the way to sort of small chunks of bits of code, or zoom out sort of, okay, so now we have a couple of million people in the platform. What's it for? So we can sort of zoom out all the way to narrative and purpose as well, and everything in between. This is just one more thing. Identity needs to be at the center. This is more important than most people understand yet. So we need to have to help them get to that sort of deep realization. There's layers and layers of this particular onion, right? Because in a normal kind of proprietary platform, you just do one of those, and then you're sort of hooked, tethered to the proprietary stuff. And those things are cleverly designed to just sort of keep you stuck. I could give you kind of just commit to memory in this video that I started 2 parallel chats. The one that had actually worked, which is 150 people strong from the conversation community. At the same time, I started the Telegram chat. And though everyone says that, hey, Telegram is a cool thing and Facebook chat is just bad, let's just leave Facebook and yada, yada, right? But 65 and 150, this tells me that in reality, the mothership exerts powerful gravitation, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to do this profound redesign, because otherwise there's a risk of, okay, we escaped velocity for a while from the Facebook thing, and then we end up doing something similar. So then people bring their Facebookified minds to the new thing, right? And then it will just be an utter waste, right? It's going to keep kind of blue collar to green collar, but sort of same hideous popularity contest, Chad mystery stuff, right? This goes so deep into the dopamine-riddled brain, so most people don't even know how effed up they are, pardon my French, right? So there's noting also that the solution-centric goes into Ted Nelson, and it goes into possibly Doug Engelbart, should we need it. I'll come back and weave that in the middle of it when it needs to be. So, sorry for hogging up so much of the mic time, but Lauren, Ron, please, so to just jump right in. You have to unmute yourself too.
Who's going to go first? Should we?
Lauren, should you?
We need Dungeons and Dragons dice.
Yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so my name is Lauren Nignon, and I'm sort of a network weaver, and I participate in a lot of these different conversations. And we're just doing the check-in now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm ruining the conversation.
No, you're not.
What I'm concerned with, what I'm trying to bring to the table here is that what we're trying to do is very, very difficult. There are a lot of pieces that need to be put in place. These like Doug Engelbart ideas and Ted Nelson ideas have been around for 50 years and they haven't been implemented.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I'm concerned about is that a lot of people don't understand these ideas, and we're trying to usher in these ideas using the most like climate change. We need to fight climate change, which is sort of a depressing conversation that a lot of people don't really want to have in actuality. They want to be talking about more trivial matters. So trying to do the deepest kind of like reworking of the internet at the same time as trying to solve the world's most intractable problems. I think it's just so heavy that I'd like to do, just to remind you to, if we can lighten it up a little bit, at least one aspect, like give people the tools to do something fun that they like to do, while building the back end that we need to make good decisions, good, the kind of complexity that we need, the kind of like semantic web, while making it accessible to people. So it's not just people who actually understand what semantic web and they know who Ted Nelson is. We need to bring other people in the conversation and make it accessible to other people. So that's just what I want to bring into the conversation.
I totally agree with all of that.
Me too.
Yeah.
And with Rock and Renew, like we were giving programs in the Midwest, like, and this is in 2004 that we started, before the like last green wave even kicked off. And it could be very confrontational, in certain regions. So we figured out very early on that was the only, like, if we talk about carrots, is that okay? Are carrots not political? Are they not complex? Yes, that worked. So like very simple, basic art projects and very simple, basic success metrics where we don't mention the problem space. We talk about resiliency and we talk about, the future of like food and things that aren't as confrontational. And then all the technical stuff. That's why we are not touching any products. Like the tech, and I think you've raised the really important point, is like figuring out always who we're talking with, and then recognizing like, okay, this is the behind the curtain stuff. Like we don't talk about the semantic web and this and the blockchain. We don't ever mention blockchain. There's no need. So that's why we chose this approach where you can just use Twitter. And that's the first way in for a person. They don't need to register a wallet. They don't need, like, if you have somebody needing to do 4 clicks with a MetaMask browser wallet, you've already lost. There's no way you're going to get a regular person in. So this is where we've come from, this place of like art projects as the way in. So we have these little hardware devices that run the program, and all a regular person experiences is a sculpture on the side of the street, you know, on the walkway, and it's got a QR code that, and maybe they have somebody in their community who has one of John's deck of cards, so they know some of the language, and we're constantly figuring out how do we introduce the language and then introduce an opportunity to utilize the language without scaring them away.
Yeah.
Ron hasn't done his check-in.
Ron, please, Ron, if you unmute yourself. And there you go.
This is really pretty exciting. It's just so I'm on board with everything.
Okay.
The thing that set me on the trajectory that in 2007 that landed me here was an experiment with an immersive learning experiment with guitar students, and it taught me that the things that I really want to do and the kind of things that we're talking about doing, I can't do it alone, and none of the things that I thought I could do alone, I really can't do alone. So now I've spent all my time since then talking to people, and the original experiments were face-to-face with people in real life, and what I learned from that has followed me through meetings with so many people who taught me a lot about what we were experiencing in these experiments. And I'd say that it's really characterized. I've finally found, and I wanted to also make the point that I made my way through all this mostly by just talking to people and asking people for help. I kind of understand just about all the things we've been talking about, but I view mostly my networking has been people. Regardless, and it brings to mind now the point that we came to about people on the front end, and another, I would say the key thing that came out along those lines, that came out of the experiments, was that what we ended up doing was building a world to share and to study what we were studying. And once we were in that world, we had to also find something to do other than just study. That was the whole point of it, to make it more interesting and not boring. Even guitar playing, there's a lot of boring things about it. And so once we were in this world that we created to learning, we found out we had to do something, and that ends up being a story. And I think that is the key. It could mean anything. I know that's also another big term that's used a lot, is story. And kind of a literal story about what an organization is doing and so forth. But in my experience, I just really have found that I can't seem to avoid having a semi-fictional aspect to it. And along the lines you were talking about, Lauren, I think there does have to be a light aspect to it, and allowing people to do what we want to do. And that's really how the worlds were built, based on what people wanted to do. So we're trying to find a way to sum all this up, but I don't have a way.
Actually, Ron, I could chime in Ron, me, and the third guy, Joachim,
Yep.
we sort of jury-rigged and built a virtual, real, immersive digital world.
Right.
You only have to have a browser, headset, and your imagination, and then you can sort of go full virtual, real immersion in and sort of imagine.
Is this Scenius?
This is Scenius, yes.
Yeah.
So we could go into space. We could climb Mount Everest, Sagarmatha, as we call it. We could go to sort of hot springs in a Japanese spa in Sweden, which is actually nice because I've actually been there in the real place. So that's also really kind of amazing if you go in a virtual tour to sort of go. So it actually works, right? The brain is amazing that way. If the brain imagines something for the synapses' sake, it's as real as if you're actually doing it, which is kind of part of us wanting to do music or immersive experiences to actually enjoy fully life itself, right? Our minds are amazing that way. I'm not saying this again, sort of doing the full body experience, obviously, but here we are, the four of us, and actually 5 of us, and actually imagine that we're talking with each other, even though I'm just sort of in a very silly way staring into my webcam, into my laptop, right? So it's kind of, but I imagine that you're sitting around my table here with me, and then that makes my mind accept that you are with me, kind of.
Wouldn't that
be more present with you, right? So this
wouldn't that be great?
But it's nevertheless real. So this is, I mean, everyone who's ever played music in a concert knows that you're just making silly noises, right? And there's some loudspeakers and stuff, right? But everyone who's been in that kind of particular thing knows, as I did kind of many years ago, I went to one of those Bruce Springsteen, and what's his name? Clarence Clemons, the saxophone player. He was sort of still around and alive, and they did the thing. And Clarence Clemons had to sort of manhandle Bruce and actually carry him physically off the stage because Bruce just wanted to keep playing because we loved him so much, and he was just got more and more energized. So he effing didn't want to stop, right? This is just awesome. Obviously just play and make believe, right? But for Bruce, that was very real, and for me, that is kind of etched itself in there because it's god awful many years ago we did that, but I can still remember almost the whole concept, right? So what's real, right? And it's this just a memory, or did I just experience it, and what happened, right? So all these things together would then allow us to do for digital identity what essentially kind of a really great rock band can do for audiences with music, right? I mean, the really great bands knows, I mean, I saw an interview with Coldplay. They know, and they told the guy who interviewed them that we know that we are not the best band, but we're really good at understanding the audience. So that's what they do, right? And they get really good. I mean, you could obviously say they sort of just gone sort of a bit too deep end into the commercialization of things, right? But it's not all bad, right? They really perform a service for the audience. So could we. Now,
and so the people then and so understanding what used to be called the audience, maybe I still call it audience sometimes, but it's kind of like really all those roles have been kind of changed, and of performer and audience. But and I think everyone has a feeling of performance. But in any case, if we understand people, I do think then we do have to have kind of what we've been talking about to some extent, which is to have a low threshold to entry.
Yeah. I mean, some people thought I was crazy. I brought together 150 people in a chat, and you don't do that, right? Because it just turned into an awful mess. But I wanted to figure out, can you do it using only chat? Because the big realization for me was then that, guys, it's just chat, right? Can you type? Great, you're in, right? So, nothing to it. Because I've seen a lot and learned a lot and sort of built some really good, solid knowledge in the conversation community. And I gave myself a permission slip years ago to just be my full obnoxious know-it-all person's brain the size of the whole planet, me, right? Which means that some people love that, and some people are intimidated the hell out of my very digital presence, and that's fine, right? I'm not playing all venues, and I just have my audience, and it's fine. And some people kind of becomes my band of brothers, and that's also fine. Some people hate my guts. Yeah, guess what? That's also fine. And if we sort of do the ecosystem thing, this is what nature does, right? I mean, not all other animals loves lobsters, right? Some animals doesn't even know what an effing lobster is, and it's fine, right? It's just different. So I have not got no clue why I said lobster. Anyway, but
it's delicious.
If it hits, Ron made it a crucial point. If we can tease out a story,
so
that is, right? Here's make digital accessible to people to want to do good things. As simple as that. That was the reason. If that could be the story, then everything else could be hidden away. I think that's kind of one of the possible options we could pursue.
Right? Can I boost Lauren's question in the margin just to keep it?
Absolutely.
I wanted to do that too. Go first.
So Lauren, do you want to ask it again or add context to it, or do you just want to go into the answer, Lauren?
I kind of have two questions. One question is, what do we mean when we say digital identity? Because it's not obvious to me. And second, I want to know what we're talking about, because I don't know the subject of our conversation, and somehow that's gotten lost. And I like a lot of things people have been saying. I just don't. I'm not getting the common thread that's linking everything.
So I can take I'll try a quick answer on both. So digital identity is part of what I think we're talking about is trying to get to a place where we take action out of these conversations. There's been awesome work where everybody, and it's hard because everybody, whenever we meet with new people, we have to set context, and that takes half a day sometimes. But so how do we shortcut that or give people the tools to set their context offline so that we can do this sort of context setting maybe before the conversation and get into some type of work that's practical and tangible and maybe has a product or a solution. So that, I think, is the root of what we're here to do, is figure, I mean, and something that was batted around in the chat was perhaps looking at a deck of cards to unpack the concepts of this space so that when we're working in our individual communities, we can at least have some core set of things like what you just asked. What is digital identity? Like, what is, self-sovereign identity? What is collective knowledge? Like some commonality of maybe 40 or 50 terms, so that then the entrepreneurial sort of spirit can take over or take off, and we can actually get into products without having to recapitulate what we meant by the root of that concept.
Before you dive in too far, also that each one of those concepts or ideas is also tied to an actual functioning piece of software,
right?
Some kind of protocol or program.
Yeah. So that not the conversations can stop being abstract, and we can set a point for the group where every conversation uses a tool so that we can defend the idea and performance test this tool versus this tool to realize this outcome.
Yeah.
Action is really important, and action is really important.
Both
and that I'll just give my last piece. So to answer the identity piece, like the problem with digital identity is that we've somehow managed to find ourselves in a system where our digital identities really don't belong to us, and therefore the answer to what digital identity is whatever the company who's got your profile says it is. So the idea of asserting self-sovereign identity, I'll put a link in the chat to this like full deck on this, but it's basically like you're the source of your own identity. It's not an administrative mechanism for others to control. No one can rent or revoke someone else's identity. And the role of names and citizenship and licenses should be as distinct as verified claims, so that somebody else can't control your identity, and you have to give consent around how you are represented across the digital and physical realm. And digital identity is, in today's age, I believe, doesn't even really exist anymore. Digital identity is simply a representation of physical identity. And that's my thought on that.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that would be in an ideal world. Your digital identity is like your twin. And it is yours to specify, to control, to decide, to shape in whichever way you want. And it is also how machine learning instances access you and how you plant flags across the entire network, how you draw information out of this network, how you can basically be aware of what's happening 24/7 in a network and draw value out of it as well. Exactly what companies are doing. Every person should be able to do that for themselves as well. So this idea of democratizing big data and data intelligence and data science as well. And to get to what Lauren said about sort of making it fun, I think, why not both? We can make it fun, and Johnny has talked a lot about art and music and experience as a way of coming into contact with machine learning, with AI, with data, with complex systems, in a way that's more, let's say, abstracted or an abstraction of. But the truth is, especially in the beginning, what Johnny described about sort of key concepts being expressed through specific strategies or processes which can be taught and which can be shaped around a sort of common goal, which we have inside John's communication, group. There are actually now a whole variety of shared goals. And the trick is to figure out which of these ideas and concepts in what order performed in sort of an orchestrated in which way deliver the desired result. And so there's a whole bunch of experiments that can be performed over time, but it's all stitched together. It's sort of duct taped together from lots of different moving parts. A lot of what we take for granted in sort of very streamlined software, this is all going to have to be done by hand in the beginning, and which means it's complicated, it's unwieldy, it'll be difficult, and it requires some commitment. And the good thing is that sure, artists and musicians are committed to art and music, the same way a climatologist or an activist is committed to ecology or sustainability. It's wherever there's a lot of attention to detail and energy to overcome obstacles. And what we're presenting is a sort of something that in a year or somewhere down the road will be incredibly powerful, but in the beginning will take a lot of effort to sort of prop up.
And yet it needs to be seamless for the non-technical people out there. So what we present within the group has to be sensitive to people's technical understanding, and we should only be giving them what they understand and actually are inspired by. So the tools need to match the audience. Yeah.
I mean, I could give you kind of very, very positive shout out to, since I have kind of living knowledge distilled from 3,900 members in the conversation committee. Some patterns that I thought were, these are way too advanced for anyone to even sort of begin to understand. No, the collective intelligence of the conversation committee just ate it up, added glorious, wonderful, additional perspectives that are within minutes, right? Right after I posted that thing, and then suddenly, bam, someone just, it's kind of like magic, right? And I have no explanation why people can just be so effing amazing almost all the time, but they can, right? But the other way is that as soon as you go into knowledge infrastructure, service infrastructure, intangibles leverage, and God knows all the other stuff that I also do, right? Kind of my day job. That's no fun, right? That's almost never fun. So that needs to be a smaller group that just sort of sweats through jury-rigged, duct tape, code, prototype tests. Obviously, I'm weird enough to actually also think that that is actually quite fun, but I do know that that's a minority of people who think that, right? And I'm talking right now with a guy in Switzerland. He's deep into hypertext. I mean deep, I mean semantics, right? And he would have very great difficulty talking with us because he's so deep into kind of ones and zeros, right? That part of the end of the semantics. So it's very, very difficult, right? But we can make use of different ways to translate back and forth in between each and everyone's individual Ken. So there's this dilemma that most people suffer from, and they don't have to. Like someone says, no, I don't get that. I can't code, so I'm useless. No. The very kind of individual Ken that everyone can bring suddenly makes it all come together. I just wish you would have experienced it, because I'm sitting like the spider in the middle of these 3,900 people, right? And I see that already this social computer is performing amazing things every day. And there's 600 people chiming in daily. On a rolling 2-month basis, of those 3,900, there's 2,500 people chiming in. Guys, we're already doing it. The problem I have is that we're hitting against all these surveillance capitalism, proprietary, strangling our reach walls, right? Because I hacked it inside Facebook, right? But God, if we take this outside and we have designs, code, digital identity that can actually support our already amazing social computer, then whoa, this will be amazing. I know it. But this is something I saw that people are kind of looking at this thing because everyone hates Facebook, right? And everyone then obviously kind of by extension hates conversation music in a way because it's Facebook, right? It's not, but they think so, right? So they're looking at things through a thin straw because that's kind of the way that people kind of defend themselves against the onslaught of bad stuff that happens in proprietary platforms, right? Because you're being played all the time. And if you're looking at things through a thin straw, everyone says that, hey, this is an elephant. No, this is complete confusion. Everyone is kind of getting atomized, fragmented, stupefied, dummified, whatnot, right? That's what the proprietary overlords want us to do, kind of playing us out against each other and just effing click the like button already, right? But we have managed to find a bunch of others. We found each other, right? So then I thought, what if I just start a chat thread that people can actually see that we can do amazing things even with such kind of a clumsy, crude tool as chat, right? And then you can actually see that we're right now in the middle of a recorded video. How did that happen? Well, we just imagined it to happen, right? We just made it happen. We enacted it, as Ron and I would say, right? So don't have fear about any weird.
As Lauren would say this.
You could go right into any which. I say biosemiotics, and no one understands what the hell did John just say, or I'm saying enaction, or I'm saying social learning, social cognition, whatnot, right? Those are already fully searchable, even in the crude thing in the conversation community. The search box, plunk it in if you want to understand more, there you go. The thing is, it's content for the search, right? You get the search result. The nice thing with the conversation community, there's people attached to each and every search result. You could ping people if you, hey, John said social cognition, I'm looking through and I'm okay. Ping someone, right? There's people around, 600 daily. And imagine now what we can do if we have 300,000 people and they're not stupefied constantly by the bombardment from the proprietary code. They start to earn value and co-create value and co-produce value and tokens and crypto to boost them, right? Imagine what will happen, because it already works now. It shouldn't work, but we are getting it to work inside the proprietary overlord surveillance panopticon thing. So, climate change is probably a breeze to solve. It just waits for us to sort of kickstart the social computer. Maybe that is actually a good thing that we're kind of 20 years from now, we're going to go extinct. Because that, if anything else, is to kick up our collective behind so we actually get going and solve it. Right? Maybe we are the solution, and then we just, I mean, I can almost get angry because 2007, 98% of all digital content was garbage. Cat gives selfies, content marketing, uninformed opinion, which was fine because it was 2007, which is the dark ages. No one knew what the hell Facebook was and what we were meant to do in it. Right? 12 years later, and this is impressive design from the platform overlords, right? It's still the same percentage. It's a flat learning curve. Do you know what flat learning curve is? It only happens in two other places, on the cemetery and in the baddest, worstest wings in insanest Holland, right? There's the two places where you have flat learning curves. In every other place in the known universe, you have a learning curve. So that is kind of okay, impressed Facebook, really, but bad, really bad, right? No. But that's not the thing. I just wanted to give you that for context, right? Immunize you from the dopamine onslaught. Right? The thing we are talking about is, even though it got bad, so we managed to keep a trickle of 2% really great stuff for 12 years straight. That's also in there. That's what I tapped into when I started Conversation with you. I already see it, and it sort of kills me that I don't have the wherewithal and the tools and digital means to sort of tell others. And to just give you one concrete thing, the curation magic I do is not that difficult. I can put that in a pattern language, then I can sort of tell others, so this scales, right? The way you actually get the social digital computer to work. Because the whatever graphs you use, they're all good. You can have social graph, shared interest graph, networks or practice graph, any which kind of hybrid graph, and those can all be tokenized, put to work. So in the 300,000 people strong, the reason for 300,000 people is because then it kicks in. The internal currency makes intangible leverage sense. It basically, the internal currency works. It's kind of a working casino, if you will. We can crude analogy anyway. But what is much more important is the value co-creation that will take place. And that was with precision what I wanted to field test with group chat and breakout rooms, right? Exactly what we're doing right now. So currency is fine, tokens fine, all that is really fine. But the key thing is with so many people, you get network effects and you also get the ability to zoom in on topic specific value. That's why I was particularly happy when you mentioned that. So this is where, yes, we have to have some kind of big things, right? And align the values like addressing climate change and making music and playing and stuff like that. But 300,000 people will also allow us to go niche, right? And that's how we win. So there's something to want to do in sort of, I don't know, Duluth or Säffle in Sweden that no one's ever heard about, and Krasnoyarsk in Russia, anywhere, right? With enough people, we'll get to those as well, right? So, and this is such an important thing because we got 12 years of homogenizing, right? There's a proprietary identity that is slapped on you. By the way, we're going to steal all your individual data and turn it into for someone else. And we got used to that. People don't even realize how effed up they got, right? Social cognition in most people's minds are kind of shocked.
Sort of.
Good thing. I'm sorry, rant over. Please take it away from that.
I mean, people are waking up to what's going on. There's plenty of press, even in sort of mainstream media channels across the news, also in TV news. It's not just print or online. You have pretty much sort of your boulevard journal, everyday journalists who are talking about Facebook's latest sort of, selling your data to some, nefarious organization somewhere who's manipulating you for something. People are pretty much aware of this now. The question is basically, what are you going to do about it? And
right, what can we do about it immediately?
What's
the smallest step that we can take as a group to
right?
And how do we host conversations where the problem space is fully understood and we don't spend much time on it at all? We dive into the artifacts and solutions. What's a small project? What's a small signal? How can we even in the community, like, would it be helpful if I led a guide on how to make your self-sovereign identity and how to begin using the tools? Lauren, I'm curious what you would find helpful in terms of tangible, like active projects and things of that nature.
Okay, first of all, I would say that Einstein said if he only had an hour, he would spend 59 minutes defining the problem, and he would only need 1 minute to come up with a solution. So I think that that's a lot of wisdom, because we might not actually know exactly what the problem is. So I do think the solution will appear the deeper we delve into what the problem is. And I think that's the point of these conversations. Second, I think what I want to say is that, the people love cat gifts. And instead of saying down with cat gifts, I think it's our job to say, okay, the people like cat gifts, but we need some tools. We need some advanced sense-making tools to start solving problems. So where do those two intersect? And how can we give people tools that are fun, that they actually want to use, while we build up the stuff in the background? So I would suggest, instead of presenting a problem like climate change, maybe we can use these conversations to brainstorm a vision and have a lot of diversity in terms of, asking people to come in and join a simple conversation that's accessible to anyone, about what they want to see and what would actually make them feel good, and what is a vision that a wide variety of people could agree on. And then maybe choosing kind of an arbitrary date where we're going to try to achieve this vision, which is maybe a date that makes it extremely difficult to achieve, where even giving something a false deadline kind of puts a pressure on you, even if it's just kind of made up, to achieve things. And so if you have a hopeful vision and a deadline, and you somehow give people some hope, I think they'll actually be very forgiving if the technology behind it is janky and doesn't work quite right, and there are lots of iterations and we have to do things over. I think they'll stay with you. But you have to give them that hope that what they're working on is important and it's fun, and they can give them the tools and opportunity to express themselves in the cat gift way they want to, because that's a means of self-expression. So embrace that, I think.
I think that's great. I was reminded when you were talking about people's embrace of the cat gift. I don't know if any of you have seen this Fire Festival documentary, or there's two of them. Have you heard about this? Like, it was like a scam concert in the Caribbean.
I totally followed it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I watched I watched both the documentaries, actually, because I'm so fascinated by this train wreck, and as an artist and just as working on this stuff, the way that they use the orange image to basically take over Instagram was genius. And some of these design firms behind this stuff, fuck Jerry, like, they're the worst. Like, it's just, but their power is one that we as a group should be very, like, take this as our marching orders, but just swap out the awful ethical, moral backing and figure out what's the cat gift corollary, what's the orange square, and how can we connect that to not, tackling climate change solved. We did it. Like, what's a small goal that we could tackle on? And, I'm always going to push for like Earth Day as a date or something around this stuff. But how can we unpack it in a way that is really accessible and not confrontational, and use the orange square and that's a challenge to our community, maybe.
I mean, these are good creative centers to have.
I think that's important. I think that's, well, all I want to say is I think that's very important what you just said. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I think we should do that, Johnny. What you just said we should do. Our version of the orange square.
So I can offer a new approach, an augmentation to the chat room, where we have some, I'll just give a quick two-second screen share so you guys can like see what we've been talking about, because this is where hopefully we'll get some repeatable tools and approaches. So in Keybase, you have, your profile, right? Like any app, you have a profile. Can you guys see this? Can you see my screen?
Nope.
Not yet.
No? Oh. Hold on, sorry. Oh, here we go, retry. Let's see if it'll work now.
Darn.
All right. Well, maybe it's not going to work. I'll send a PDF to you guys. But basically, just imagine if in our conversation, in our chat room, we had a file system underneath it, and everyone who participates can create their identity and link it to their Twitter account or their Facebook or their GitHub. So anyone who's a non-technical user who wants to participate in our conversation, they just have to have a Twitter account. But the technical value of this is manyfold. But the two most important things are every transaction you make, every message you write is signed to your identity. And there's a file system underneath the chat room. So there can be rules to the chat room. And there can be a chat bot inside of the chat room that does all the technical heavy lifting. So all the things that we've heard talked about with DAOs and smart contracts and all this, you don't have to know anything about any of that. We just have to come up with the rules of regular agreement that say, here's what this chat room's about. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's an incentive. If you do this, you get this. And all of the qualities that you've ever heard proselytized about smart contracts and blockchain, we can offer those inside of this chat room, but you don't need to set up a wallet. You don't need to do any of that technical stuff. And we're not promoting this as a production solution that's going to scale to, 10 million people. This is going to be a duct tape thing where behind the scenes, we're going to have the technical people helping to put it together, because we're not trying to sell a token. We're trying to sell that these processes are useful. And if there's rules to a chat room and a chatbot can come in and say, hey, that's outside the scope of this conversation or whatever, it might be helpful. I don't know. Like we can play with those rules and we can build as many of these chat rooms as we want as experiments. And that's my piece.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's great. Because people keep talking about how do we scale? Scale what? We have nothing that works.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's bottom up.
Let me offer just kind of a comment there, because this is important, right? I mean, there's a company in London now, I think it's called Günther's or something. No one has heard of them, right? Because kind of 3,000 people, the most clever guys on the planet in that company. And if you pay them $1 million, they will clue you in on anything, right? But this is kind of completely proprietary. This is just for the hoi polloi, nothing for us. I happen to have done some startup things in London, so I know some people that are kind of just completely kind of far away from all the normal stuff, right? They're already doing all this and more, and we are not invited. They do scaling, they do hybrid protocols, they do anything, right? If those guys get to scale their stuff, we are effed. That's kind of the long and short of it. Right? That's why we have to scale, because if we don't scale our stuff, kind of more peer or more normal people or more kind of better ethics, call it what you want, right? This is completely dangerous, and I know that I sound like an old curmudgeon, strange guy now, right? But I've seen so many battles being sort of shunted to the side. Everyone just wants to do nice things, and then just it gets killed. We have to scale.
Yeah,
right?
but just to clarify,
we can't use that, right?
We can scale any of these vertical solutions that we want, but knowing what to scale, because here's the main point. Any blockchain technology that says that they've solved one of these big social problems and they can scale across all the challenges, the token mechanics, the identity, like it's not happening. It's a hybrid. So we have to figure out what problem we want to solve and which scale we want to go through, and then I can tell you which 9 protocols will combine to deliver that scale today and tomorrow. But I think what that London consulting firm will never scale anything, because regular people still can't touch any of this technology. And until we can demonstrate, no one has demonstrated a successful community project where people are playing and touching with the incentives of blockchain, because nobody can use MetaMask. Nobody can figure out a smart wallet. So what I'm just suggesting is that we can introduce the bottom-up channels, and then using your methodology, we can gain some real insights from those conversations about which things are ready to scale first. And then the behind-the-scenes technical person in the chat room can say, okay, well, we're going to use Holochain and Archain and this Ethereum platform, and that's how we'll scale that vertical. And another use case is going to be a completely different set of protocols, because it's so unique to what's being said and how much money is at risk, and like all of these technical qualities that these individual blockchain companies are spending a year trying to figure out the whole thing. Meanwhile, nobody's figured out each of the components. No. So I think our path could be valuable towards figuring out what the component solutions are.
There's two things that are important here. And one is there's a book called Scale.
Johnny, you said that the conversation was pretty key to the work is in the conversation.
Yes.
And having a chat bot inside of the conversation that can help us to parse the conversation, to like pull out all of the insights and do all the heavy lifting, that's something that we could start doing, like running the entire Facebook group through semantic web tools, extracting path insights, and having getting John's algorithm into a Python program that we can run, so that there could be 20 of John's, because right now, like I look at that work to be superhuman work. That's one of the first things I think we could scale, is having John's algorithm be a test bot that we can bring in, and we can do this in Keybase today. We can program that, because I imagine if John's like going back through and saying, okay, it's been a few days, let me reseed this link, and that's what I see. You're pasting back, nudging us, and we could have a chatbot helping you to be the nudge that gets the conversation.
I mean, I'm really happy that you see that, because this really isn't difficult, right? There's 2 books. One is from Geoffrey West, and the book is called Scale, and the other is Christopher Alexander, Pattern Languages, right? So that's it, right? Obviously, this is a hard slog, both of those books, but there's just 2 books, right? There's nothing to it. And if stuff in there is hard, ask someone, ask me, right? I can sort of clue you in on some dense terminology. It's nothing, right? What Geoffrey West has done is given us a way to scale that is not the oligarch proprietary overlord scaling, right? Because there's weird things going on with language even, right? Where someone says, no, we don't want to scale, we just want to do nice thingies, right? Then you'll get shunted to the side. I've seen it 30 years straight. I was heading into politics way back when, right? And I didn't, because some of these things have been gained already even in language. This is why what Johnny is suggesting is probably key. I'm fully aware that I made a sort of crap job of explaining myself in this video in large parts of the conversation community, but really it's almost beside the point, because the things I'm suggesting can be tested, right? So the group chat, the breakout groups, it's just one part of it, right?
Right. Well, I think the keyword is I think the keyword is automation.
Yeah, I mean, the automation is in itself a augmentation, and augmentation is one of those other words that's kind of that's not in common parlance. Right? But if you do things, if you have a great idea in a breakout room, let's say you get the cure for cancer, you just discovered it. Right? Whoa, this is good work, right? You want that idea to reach as many other people who could benefit from that idea as possible. But now we simply don't have the platforms, digital means, tools to get us that reach for that really great idea. Some of the things can happen anyway, right? Like big rock stars or celebrities can sort of just go viral, as they say, right? But really, innovation is a team sport, right? It's a relay race. It's us, right? And we could actually solve climate change, global poverty, whatnot, if we get to access and steward the actual mechanisms to perform knowledge logistics. But knowledge logistics doesn't make any sense other than above a certain size people. I mean, there's lots of research done, like 5, 6, 7,000 people, and suddenly there's a good solid sense of community because there's enough people. One can be a car mechanic and so on and so forth, right? This is just math, really. But we have sort of been inside an old narrative that we sort of got told that shut up and buy the plastic with the plastic card and the plastic smartphone and the plastic whatnot, right? And we just did for the decades. So this is something that suddenly people really is, hey, holy smokes, we're doing everything wrong. Now this is going to be painful, but there's every chance that we actually can do these things, because if we then do this amazing platform and we have loads of fun, which we should, and I have some card decks if we want to have really sort of serious fun, it's all for naught if by the end of the day we haven't really done something, right? So this is where and scaling is not just big, right? Scaling is kind of opposite scale. Some things you do by yourself, some things you do by groups of 4, groups of 150, groups of 5,000, groups of a couple of million. That's just how nature does it, right? But we have sort of not really gotten there where we do what is very, very natural for us in real life, and we could do the same and more in digital life. And again, identity, to just give you one example, identity got hijacked, we got played in the digital world by the proprietary code. If we reclaim that, we could clone ourselves. So we could not just have one digital identity, we'd have many. I could give you a simple example. Let's say I am a circle of musicians. I used to play music way back when, right? So I have a digital circle with just me as a musician, and they are musicians. Then I can get to enjoy being just a digital part of me that is just music. Right? And then I can clone my digital identity into something else, right? The conversation community manager or something, right? Or the biosemiotician, anything, right? So this is something we can actually do, and those digital identities can sort of start to earn us money or co-produce value. We can sort of be asleep, right? And then we wake up in the morning and one part of our digital identity has sort of done some weird stuff with other digital identities, and there you go. Ideas commingled and all wrapped up, packaged, here you go. Right? So there's so much stuff that we erroneously believe that we do digital on the side. But we don't have to. We can enact our own real selves much farther into digital, as we are now doing in this meeting here, right? And
right, but the missing component is always that a conversation is not turned into a database. There is no existing mechanism to effectively do this that's available to us, at least.
No, not
we
yet.
we know Facebook is doing it and Google is doing it at great cost, and a lot of sweat equity goes into that. What Johnny is proposing is sort of setting up a very stitched together basic mechanism for building a database underneath every conversation that's being held across your sort of group of 3,900 people.
With explicit permission of all of the people.
Right, of course.
And a non-black box, so everybody's opted in, and it's and
exactly.
Right,
I mean, those are important points, because with the pattern language, you can do that without sort of violating anyone's personal privacy, nor upsetting GDPR, which are really kind of boring but important points, right? With the pattern language, which I've sort of already teased out, and the graph and the stuff, we could basically just scrape the whole conversation community, lock, stock, and everything, all the content, right? And we could sort of figure out how to query that, and suddenly you would say that, hey, there's an effing algorithm already. This is what I mean. This is not just my algorithm. This is my algorithm field tested with the collective intelligence from 3,900 actual living, breathing human beings, which has been on for 4 years. So there's amazing stuff. And
with attribution, though, because when you start to take apart or query the database, and people start to see what they've contributed in terms of conversation over the last year, where this stuff connects, where it comes up, it becomes really interesting also for each individual person. You were mentioned in this conversation, or the bot found this conversation that you had from years ago, or some statement that you made which applied to or was used by or referenced by somewhere else.
So as a bot, I've seen the word epiphany in the chat room for 4 minutes, and I want to hear what the epiphany is from Lauren, because that's a signal.
Okay, well, in some other chats we've been having with John, one understanding that I've come away with, we haven't actually specifically talked about this, but what I'm starting to hear is that I think what's forming out of this is mimetic currencies, which are currencies based on ideas. And these currencies are not like blockchain currencies. It's not like Bitcoin that you want to hold on to it. It's not a store of value, but it's a currency. It's a high velocity currency that's meant to encourage trade and spread of ideas. And the epiphany that I had is that I think that we're actually making things harder than we need to be, saying that we need to get 2 billion people off of Facebook, which is incredibly difficult because everyone's just stabilized. They're like logged in. They don't want to go to a new system. They just want to stay. They want to stay on Twitter, and everyone's on Facebook. What we want something that we can just stay where we already are, and have freedoms that we don't have right now, and maybe gently be attracted to something new. But what a mimetic currency can do, what the epiphany was that we don't need one single platform. Like all of these different things like Solid and Archain and Holochain keep imagining themselves as the platform. Instead, what we need, instead of the solution, we need to have ideas, and we need matching technology, which will help us to realize an idea, match it to the technologies that can accomplish it the best, the suite of protocols that will help that the best, instead of like, we must all be on one protocol.
Yes.
So that's kind of like what, okay. That's what I got from.
I would high five you if I could.
Me too.
That's exactly, I agree 100%. And CardStack actually has a pretty good, of course, that, any of these projects that attempted and maybe succeeded in raising $20, $30 million, They have you know, recreated the same problem for themselves, where they have shareholders to answer to until they deliver their value platform. So a lot of them are swinging for the fences, and I appreciate the projects that at least understand that that's not necessarily in a decentralized, you know, platform cooperative way the best thing. And CardStack, although they're trying to build an everything machine of sorts, their approach towards what you just described is one of the best I've seen, where as a user, you're just going to do what you want to do. And they have a matching engine, and they assume that as a user, you're going to have 42 different DApp coins across the different dApps, but you don't want to be a day trader. You don't want to have to like load up all these different wallets and, oh, I want to do something with the water. Let me get my water coin. And like, that's ridiculous. That's never going to work. And talk about the gravity of Facebook. Add to that the gravity of creating an alternative to Facebook and making people have an alternative to the dollar. That it's like totally two stacked oppositions. So they have a matching engine that's like Pandora or Spotify, where like the way I get paid as an artist is like sort of a sum of all the plays that happen. And there's a matchmaker that says, okay, well, what's Johnny's pro rata share of that? And how often did users actually search for Johnny's music? And, you know, so it's like, did the user want to do that value thing? Okay, well, we're going to pay out this coin and this coin and this coin, so that, you know, I also agree with you. I don't think it's ever going to be one platform that wins this whole thing. But the idea of a matching and optimization across these different things is something that we can offer without also making people come to our store. It's a protocol that can exist, and it's like it can work across all these different platforms.
I mean, this is all amazing good stuff. The memetic currency, which already exists inside Facebook, the conversation community, it's not a currency in its own original sense, but what it does, it almost always constellates around almost near optimal co-creation of value potential. This is just simply amazing. And this happens in every conversation, in every comment thread. Now, everyone can't see that because some comment threads are really short and possibly just two people. But me having my pattern language goggles on can see this every time, right? So everyone wants to do their best, want to bring good value, want to sort of get good value. This happens every single time, even in such a kind of a bad environment. So if we then start to, tokenization is not the right word, protocol is better, but it doesn't really matter what we call it, as long as we build kind of a simple enough, good enough machine that kind of sort of works, right? Because then we can just iterate away, right? The iterative process is essential for this, because I'd rather have us build something and it works just for us, the 4 or 5 of us, right? And it kind of looks awful and kind of almost kind of sort of works, but it works, right? And then I'm not sure if you heard kind of the Airbnb story, right? Because story is kind of important. Airbnb started to call themselves Air Mattresses. It's a god-awful, terrible name, and it didn't work. Right? The 7th iteration with the same team, then that was Airbnb. Now, you could argue that Airbnb might not be the best possible, and it's kind of a bit extractive, and it's weird, and it's kind of meta, but no one can argue that they hit something that was kind of address people's needs, right? And this is what we also can do. 7 iterations from now, we can do our version of Airbnb, right? And then that doesn't even have to be perfect either. But it's good enough that people say, hey, I want to use one of those. I don't know what the hell you've done, but what it is, but I want to use one of those, right? And by the way, I'm going to tell my mates as well to use it, right? So and this is where, yes, for many important reasons, why we will never need to do the 2 billion thing, right? Facebook thing was just kind of an extractive scaling model. And the wrong one at that. But at 300,000, tokens, currencies, protocols works through network effect. There's just simply enough of us to go around, right? And also the anchoring into local, which is kind of the big why of it, right? The band playing, or the local farmer being supported and shipping his things for whoever wants to buy from, that just simply works. Below that, it kind of not really works all that well, right? And which means that we don't have to stay at sort of 300,000. We can sort of build it to 300,000. That will solve all our sort of practical financial worries, right? Because then it will be worth lots, right? And then we just do it again and again. Or we just open source the whole of it, and then others can do kind of similar things. Right? So,
well, because the 300,000 limit could potentially be domain oriented, maybe, like where each group is sort of the outer limit is based on this category or topic or field, or
yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, and also the 300,000, it just has to be kind of like a couple of hundred people, like a cooperative in the middle, to sort of assume kind of until this is really flying, we'll have to sort of sort out the kinks, right, and do the iterations and do.
Right, you mean like curators, a few hundred curators?
Yeah, curators, stewards, people who are kind of clear enough that this is not kind of the rich quick thing. This is not the blockchain. This is not the this or the that. This is not kind of a big entrepreneurial, big vertical, big corporate monolith. None of that. We kind of, but we don't have to be Superman. None of us, right? It's kind of just a bunch of people who are kind of clear enough that, hey, this might be a cool thing to do, right? That's kind of the sum total of what you can sort of get you in to actually do it. And then obviously the big test is kind of, are you actually helping doing it? They're all baking cake and eating cake.
Can I steer us towards like an actionable next step?
Absolutely, yeah.
So Lauren suggested, setting a date, like a sort of audacious goal. And, I think, so David and I have been working on this thing around Earth Day, which just happens to be about enough far off in the distance. It's a couple months away. And then going through the summer, the whole month of June, Sense Collective, which is like our nonprofit and design firm, we have this thing at NYU ITP, which is NYU's Interactive Telecommunications Program. It's like the school for the recently possible. It's NYU's computer science lab inside the Tisch School of the Arts. So it's where the processing programming language and P5.js were invented. A lot of Arduino, VR, creative coding, maker stuff, soft labs, robotics, you name it. And there's a lot of work on decentralized networks. They have like the I-Beam kind of fellowship as a part of it, sort of. So I teach every summer there. It's a whole month, and it's like an adult summer camp. So like, you can get a scholarship, even if you pay full price. I think it's like $1,400, $700 if you sign up before a certain date. Like, what we're doing this year is we're going to have a fellowship program, and we're putting out to different communities. Our goal is to set out our tools as a set of tools that people could use to build something good, useful for their community under the umbrella of like resiliency, and that umbrella could be adopted by another topic. But what I'm proposing and offering is that as a group, we could put this out to the conversation community, come up with a few like real clear goals, and then put this out. Maybe some corporate sponsor it. Like someone's going to have to pay for the people to go, or they'll have to pay for themselves. But I'm thinking about it like, if your community sends you off to some place to learn some amazing thing, and you come back with amazing tools that you can then build something better for your community. So we could kind of use the timeline between April, Earth Day, and then the whole month of June to play around and test out like, well, what would be good to build? Because the people who go to this thing, they show up like every day, and you have access to a $20 million lab from 10 a.m. to 10 at night, 7 days a week for 30 days. And then there's all these amazing classes and minds working that every year we've done it, amazing stuff comes out of it. Like whole companies are born. So it's just a great like set of opportunities I think we could put into the center of this.
Yeah, I think so too. It's also a great creative constraint, right? And then we can sort of set up a date, which Lauren first mentioned. And also, I think very, very importantly, if we have, doesn't have to be really kind of the perfect goals or the great goals or the kind of optimal goals, but kind of any which kind of goals that people say, okay, they're actually going to do something by that time.
And this place is perfect for that. Nobody there will be like expecting some buttoned up, like this is a place for creative iteration and experimentation. And it's like totally fine that it is what it is,
Yeah. And I mean, I think we could set up possibly one kind of lab, whether that is Mattermost or Slack or just chat or Google Docs. I'm not sure. I'm completely agnostic when it comes to where that takes place, right? But we have to have some kind of repository where, because there's kind of a meta thing that almost sort of kind of turn this kind of more volatile than it has to be, this recorded thing here, right? That everyone is kind of feeling like a kind of time pressure, and we shouldn't feel that, right?
Johnny,
I mean, that can go on for 4 or 8 hours, but I mean, if we want to do this, it's going to take kind of like a 1 week kind of sprint or something, right? And everyone is kind of almost kind of wonky inside from having done all the work. But I've been around a couple of projects that I know that without that sort of deep dive into actually just doing it, it just won't happen, right? It's yeah. So
well, lucky for us, Johnny's done a lot of the work already, so he can just show us what he's built so far, and then we can decide whether we want to adopt this or not.
Yeah. And it can be poked and pulled apart, and there's no like ownership sense on my part or our part. Like it's a process that's open to, forking basically.
Yeah, I mean, the same with my infrastructure, right? It's the only thing I want to take care of is that if we pull off this infrastructure of mine and we actually build something and we scrape lots of conversation community data, that we sort of do so in as ethical and transparent way as possible to just sort of be nice to all the community members, right? Yeah. And also, if at all possible, out of that scraped stuff, some figuring out in such a transparent way as possible. So, for instance, Ron, who has done his lion's share of actually adding stuff other than me into the conversation grid, he actually gets part of the cut, right?
Right,
and,
attestation.
I mean, some of those,
right.
Even though those are kind of perfectly doable, I think it sets kind of the right vibe for things, that people know that, hey, these guys are actually good guys and they're trying the hardest they can and do the good thing. So, because that's what we want to bring inside this thing if we build it, right?
Right. Well, it's the Swedish music production model. Everybody that was in the room gets a bit.
Yeah. That's just how we do it in Sweden, right? And it like takes us more forever, and we talk everyone's ears off, and then it just works. So it's kind of a very Swedish model. Yeah, I saw that one. And I mean, big thanks, because you are the one of the few daring enough to actually tell me to shut up now, and that's sorely needed. So used to, wonderful service.
I'm getting comfortable with you, John.
I've done this amazing thing, you bringing your collective intelligent human best for 4 years. I'm sitting on such a mother load of great stuff, so it kills me, right? So that you can hear that in me, right? I want to effing do it, right? So that's kind of why I sort of, I can sort of almost brain dump. So that part is not going to be a problem. We can build this, no problem, right? And the adoption thing, that you could see for yourself. The first couple of weeks of the group chat was kind of just a bloody mess, right? But that's always how these things go, right? It's complex, it turns into a bloody mess, and then suddenly it just starts to work, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is just Stigmagi. And you can ask me tons of stuff about Stigmagi as well. It just effing works. Stigmagi is a wonderful way, nature's way to do scaling in a more natural, unfolding, organic, self-organizing way. So Jeffrey West so happens to have written tons of good stuff about that as well. And long and short of it is that if we end up with kind of 300,000 in kind of, let's say, the planet kind of group, everyone else will think we're crazy in the cult, but we're not, right? That's fine. If we, on the other hand, do 100,000 small groups of 3, kind of like a clandestine kind of, I don't know, whatnot, right? So everyone is just doing their thing, and it's sort of kind of more distributed, is kind of the mathematical term for it. None of that will sort of wreck this thing, right? It just will figure out as we go the way we usually do things anyway. So clear goals and sponsoring is probably the core takeaways, I think, which we just should start to hammer out in detail. So we can then just plunk it down in the group chat. That will create a stir, I cannot guarantee you. And then everyone will just sort of have their knickers in a twist for that for a while, and then people will sort of start to trickle out and say, yeah, well, I can, and so on, right? So it's kind of, because I could give a kind of a lowdown on that as well. It took me 6 months to introduce the rule in the conversation community, add considered comments on other people's posts. And it almost killed me. Because it's just one rule, it's just kind of like 8 words. It took 6 months for it to be adopted.
Right.
Some of these things requires enormous amounts of patience. So if we start now, then suddenly in November this year, people say, hey, this is actually a great idea. And why did it take such a small forever for them to sort of realize that? Could you have done it in 15 minutes? No. People are busy doing loads of things. Their minds are kind of completely under fritz from doing massive information overload for a couple of years and so on, right? And they have to do the American hustle, which is a completely stupid idea to do, and so on and so forth, right? So there's lots of things going on. But this is also part of, if we offer something really simple that just starts to work, that is possibly the value proposition right there, right? We'll start with chat and we get it to work, and we always make sure that everyone else that brings on board just kind of is finding some way to derive some value out of it, right? The value proposition is, I have clever people in London and Stockholm and Finland and God knows what else. So if we want to do bells and whistles, we can do that, but we don't have to begin with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Young people, it's slightly off of your topic at the moment, but I just got to get it in that young people that I know anecdotally are not on Facebook. And none of them are, very few of them are in the conversation community, for example. And it's anecdotal, but what I'm hearing is that they're hardly on anything except whatever they just kind of connect with, maybe a fairly small network of friends.
Well, and
what's going to happen to them?
Facebook has its tentacles all over the place. So a lot of people who may not be on Facebook are on Facebook anyway, just tangentially, because they know somebody who's on Facebook.
But this is where the deck of cards comes in, and some of the technological solutions that we come up with.
I was just going to say, talk about that.
You know, there's this thing called Secure Scuttlebutt, right, which is like another platform cooperative, but it also deals in like offline communication, and you basically catch up with your network whenever you get online. And using Keybase, we can create you can create as many identities as you want. So if you want to throw away identity, or you're somebody at risk for identity exposure or whatever, you can create a new seed wallet. And if there will be certain rules where you'll need to prove your identity against your real identity, but you can make a seed wallet, and also the deck of cards can have a QR code. So you can scan in a deck of cards for a pod or a regional network, and there'll have to be some network administrator who's sort of like the librarian for that community. But if there's people in the community who want to participate and aren't on Facebook, they can create a paper wallet with a QR code and scan themselves into the opportunities, online and offline. And that will catch them up and allow them at any point at which they have to prove that that was them, or they want to extract some of the benefits that they earn. Let's say some non-online person shows up and does a beach cleanup and wins $20. They can scan that in and later catch up and go online and connect their identity in whatever way meets their kind of criteria or restrictions. The cool thing about Keybase and our approach to it is we can get people right into the meat of the work and worry about that stuff later. Like, we always can catch up a person to the blockchain, but only do it when the person's interested in doing it, and don't throw all the technical crap at them in the beginning. Let them first see that this is something worth their time, and then there'll be the paper trail that gets them caught up to the conversation. So kind of an abstract look at how that fits in.
I mean, this is all great. Maybe there's 3 things, right? Clear goals, sponsoring, platform co-op. And platform co-op could just be kind of a almost symbolic slush fund for now, right? To just sort of sort out that, let's say $10, right? Something. And to tell us that, I really want to do this, right? So the platform co-op is then important for a possible sort of charter. And why is it important with a charter? Well, because the charter will sort of tell others that, okay, that's kind of the premise from which you are building this, right? People can get very easily confused, reserved, that's just they're kind of building a mousetrap and they're going to sort of suck us into their platform, blah, 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 right? But if we have a charter and we actually sort of have, as a co-op, we're committed to this, we sort of pledge our allegiance to this charter, right? Then people can hold us to it. So those things...
Well, it can be more than a charter.
Right? But they're kind of quite important. They're kind of like, if you enter a band, which I was a member of, this is kind of like ages ago, we actually pledged that we couldn't just leave, right? If I would to leave, I have to effing bring a replacement for my instrument, right? And then I can leave, right? So kind of those things, right? And this is kind of comforting for people to know that we're going to be around for a while, right?
Yeah.
But this is not kind of like serfdom forever. This is kind of just, we could wriggle the details, but something to tell others that, okay, these guys are for real, right?
Right. Well, I mean, we could do better than a charter and make it a legal entity of a simple kind.
Yeah, yeah.
And also using our own tools.
Exactly. So I mean, the entity lives on some Keybase kind of network, some kind of thing.
It lives on an Arduino.
Yeah.
In Johnny's basement.
That's almost a band name, right? A couple of Arduinos in Johnny's basement.
So can we talk about this NYU thing?
Yes.
Again. Okay, if we're dealing with NYU, I mean, that's a pretty recognizable brand, and we have people now, access to people who can have conversations. What I would suggest is that we can incentivize some conversations to happen over kind of specific topics, and maybe, or what I've been wanting to do for a long time was host almost like a global cipher where we completely invent a new technology that doesn't exist at all, give it a name, and then talk about it in groups all around the world and just kind of like materialize it, but not in it like the technical back end. You start with a front end of just talking about what you want to see and what would be cool, and just give people like space to talk about it and visualize it. And then the best conversations, the best ideas that are generated could be taken maybe by the people at NYU and then made into actual videos, like commercials for this fictitious technology. But that would incentivize the people to actually talk about it, to then maybe get their kind of ideas realized and like something that they can actually see that looks real. And you could maybe even talk to people at iStock Photo or something like that, so that students could have access to that, to all the images or sounds, and put it together. Because NYU has that brand and trust that they have a certain level of professionalism to make stuff. So it's just, I'm just putting that out there as kind of an idea of something we could do.
That's great. It's kind of eerily, I didn't think that I should add that diagram, right? Because it's kind of weird and it's a mess and 700 ideas and it's kind of an old thing I did way back. But what you just said is kind of a way to implement lots and lots of different ideas, and then things just happen, right? And this means that us possibly at risk of sort of over-focusing on just the platform, which also Lauren has spoken about against, and wisely so. What we've come up with a whole bunch of ideas, crowdsources in the conversation community and elsewhere, and then that is sort of heartfelt need and desire from people, right, who we want to bring in. And then the platform will then have to sort of accommodate that. And I'm thinking very much on my feet here, right? And this might just be kind of wild, crazy ideas that doesn't really gel, but it's a great idea, Lauren, because it sort of brings in kind of people and their sort of engagement and their stories and their ideas and insights and whatnot right from the beginning. I think that's
Right,
I haven't thought how we can do it, but
creating a little dream space is nice.
And the conversation is a funnel where it's narrowing towards a tangible thing. And, you know, it's like, okay, not everybody in your town or chat room is going to want to go to New York City and spend a month working on this thing. But there's a lot of people who will be like, I love that I can contribute to this idea and somebody else is going to go and work on it because I don't have time to do that. Like, you know,
next best thing. Yeah.
I think what you're suggesting, Lauren, and what we're talking about at the moment, also it just kind of reminds me, maybe on a different time scale, of how science fiction works and brings about realities.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's fictional, but it brings about reality.
I don't know if you saw that, but the only thing that really went wild last year was one, write the science fiction story. The catch, it just has to be 6 words.
Yeah.
It was like crack for the poor conversation community members. Right? They had to go there again and again and again and come up with this.
It was catnip for the cat GIFs.
But only the truth, half of those short stories are simply amazing. They are. I mean, they just kind of. So this is what big takeaway from Lauren's idea here, that we just have to let them, right? And yeah, some of the ideas will be really out there, and some of them will be really bad, but some of them might be actually just great, right? And then if we then building a platform, this stuff already, momentum, stories, ideas already wanting to happen, right, on it. So it just makes perfect sense, actually. It's, but yeah, obviously it helps that I actually like science fiction. Some people would, I had 3 people actually chiming in to me privately in the conversation meeting, says that they absolutely hate me and hate the whole community because there's always going to be some of that. Right? It's just that's life, right? Anyway,
well, I'll put something together.
Talking too much, knowing too much, and hogging the mic, and God, I just gave that up, right? I want to do this, and if I'm weird, fine. So, but really, one of the other key takeaways, kind of on a very, very protocol, technical, meta level, which is, I had kind of this hunch that when we're going to build this, it will just sort of gel on the code protocol sort of pattern language level. And I'm really keen on sort of trying to sort of see if we can go to some sort of deep cellar breakout corner somewhere and see if that actually holds, right? So first thing after this is I'm going to send you, Johnny, and David, this information architecture so you can have a go at it, right? It's crude. It's just 4 modules essentially and some stuff around. The thing you need to know is that when you want to code this and sort of turn my weird algorithms into actual stuff that works, is that there's just 2 building blocks in the whole information architecture. And that's story and feedback loop. There's nothing else in there. There's just 2 things, right? Now, the rest is me having distilled enormously 4 years of stuff from as many of the conversation community members I could sort of get my hands on. Right? So this will also have to be tested. When we scrape the whole thing with permission via pattern language, so by the GDPR police, then that will be the truth test for me, right? If what I'm saying with that information architecture actually holds water, so it actually just works, right? And then when we code it, but I'll get to that. The important thing is that we probably need to work on ideas, kind of a non-coders, and then sort of the deep geeker in terms of protocols, pattern languages, and stuff in another breakout room or doc or something. And this brings me to kind of my closing thing, that what I suggested, the method cards, is basically translating between English and English, in between code English and non-code English.
Mm-hmm.
It's a why and a how. But that method cards also does many other things. One, it sort of brings bridges across, so we don't sort of start to talk weird stuff and no one understands it. It also helps others weigh in who might not ever chime in this recorded conversation, or just happen to come across us 6 months from now and just, guys, what's up? What can I
Catch
do?
up, right?
I mean, I have 3 grown kids. The youngest is 20. Oh God, I forgot how old he is. 21.
We'll edit that part out of the video.
Yeah, but I asked him, right? Okay, because he knows about my stuff, right? He actually thinks it's quite cool to have a dad that does cards and games and pattern language. So I said to him, Elliot, can you clue him in? Like, what's the thing I need to think about? And he said, Dad, it doesn't matter. If the participants can mod some of the stuff, it'll be okay. And he's been playing games since he was, I don't know, since he could reach to the keyboard, right? So he's tons of ways better than me in all kinds of things, digital, right? and games, and yeah. And he's young, right? So he's kind of not encumbered by stuff. So if we have a good enough platform, and that digital identity allows them to start to mod whatever digital place they want to create around them. I haven't got a clue how we do that, but I just know that it's really, really important, because then they will make their own. So they not just create a digital identity, which is better than the proprietary, they enact the digital space around their own created, better digital identity. I think that's
game.
Cool. Well, I've got to jump. I think probably everybody does. I'm going to put together my update on my using. Lauren, I saw in the sidebar about the legal entity. That's obviously also important. I think a working legal structure that we could probably borrow is from Colony.io, and it's like a it's a blockchain thing, but it's not an exclusive thing. It's a way to record a DAO. And Aragon also has an excellent DAO DAC template, and that just simply is like a capture mechanism. And then you still have to do legal entities in the real world, but it's like you can use the smart contract DAO concept first, and then create a legal structure from that, as opposed to vice versa. It's a lot harder to turn an old-fashioned company into a DAO, you know.
Can I make a suggestion that you, Johnny, and maybe John together come up with a sort of accelerating schedule of workshops that we can do together? Good
idea.
Yeah.
When sort of as you get further and further into your Keybase filing system, identity management, etc., that we sort of regularly meet and you take us through it and we set up our identities and start to use these tools in some kind of particular in at least in the context of this kind of conversation, it might be very useful.
And I think there are a number of grants that we can apply for that, like there's a ton from the blockchain space. And that's been David and my roadmap for a while, and it certainly applies to this, where we can like specify and outline what we're describing. And I've already talked to a few blockchain organizations where they finally are in a place where they have to prove value to their token holders in order to regain any of the value they lost from the speculator, greater fool exits. And so like offering them an opportunity to be a sponsor of this thing, not an exclusive sponsor, but like at least as far as our technology is concerned, we're using like 12 or 13 different blockchain protocols at any given time. And some of it is just to show, hey, well, here's how you could do this. And so it seems like a reasonable proposition to bring that to Aragon or CardStack or whatever and say, hey, we have a whole program and we'll demonstrate that your technology is really good for X, Y, and Z, but we need money to do this, this, and this. And
I know a couple of people in those companies as well, and they might think it's actually cool to help us and chip in, not just sponsoring, but also sort of some select man hours to actually sort of, hey, that thing, Colony, great, yeah. No, that thing, no, you should do the DAO stack, and so and this will save us loads of time, right? So if they can chime in like that. So it helps to sort of know some of these guys, because some of those guys are really helpful. They're kind of at the same, more or less, trajectory as we are, right? So, and we'll help them back, obviously. But yeah.
What were you saying, Lauren?
Is that Aragon in Madrid or in Berlin?
I think they're in Berlin. It's from the ETH Grant Foundation, an Aragon Nest program, and yeah, they have a very good grant sponsorship thing that has like the background of developer support. Also, there's a Stellar one, because Stellar is the blockchain that actually sponsored Keybase. They gave them like $20 million, and they added in the Stellar wallet into the Keybase platform. Like, we were using Keybase even before that, and now you can airdrop tokens to somebody. If I know your Twitter address, I can send you a tweet saying, hey, I sent 5 Stellar Lumens for you, and you just have to sign up for Keybase to claim them. Like, it's very easy, and they have $20 million that they give away every, like, you know, half of a year. They gave away $45 million last year. So these are the kinds of things where we could get some, you know, platform funding, and just be clear about what we're going to spend it on and how each of us is going to deliver our value. And that's a great way of starting, like, the, you know, the support methods, I think.
Yeah. Excellent.
Cool. Awesome, guys and gals. Great talking with you.
Famous last words. Are we just going to stop the broadcast and just press pause and continue later on?
I have a 4.5-year-old son who has a 39-degree fever. So I'm going to go and I'm going to go take care of him now.
Big thanks. This has been an amazing video. I'm just going to stop the broadcast now.